When we act and project from our wounds, we become the very thing we're projecting onto them. Are they actually toxic, or are you projecting that onto them? And in fact, it might be you that's behaving poorly and you're stuck in a reactive cycle that you can't break out of. In today's lesson, I'm going to unpack that internal cycle so that you can know for sure whether you're actually the toxic one or not, and why we feel like we don't have a choice when we react, like we're out of control, like a wounded animal. And make sure you stick around to the very end of the video, because I'll show you how to take responsibility for your past so you can be sure you're not toxic anymore, and finally heal yourself so that you can shift out of your past patterns that could be pushing people away. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm Amy, and I help women who struggle with insecurity, anxiety, and low self-worth in relationships. And I teach them how to heal their past and connect to their true, authentic self so they can create the healthy, secure, and loving relationship they desire. And if you want more content on this topic, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell button so you get notified when I post new videos twice a week. Now, before we begin, I want to announce that a few spots have opened up for the free one-to-one consult with me for the Love by Design program. Make sure you stick around to the very end of the video for the announcement on how to sign up for that. There's a pretty uncomfortable realization that those of us who've been in a cycle of toxic relationship patterns will come to eventually. And that's the realization that we've been toxic ourselves to some degree in order to participate in that dynamic. That in being in a relationship that had toxic dynamics, we ourselves have to take responsibility for our part in that cycle in order to heal and move forward towards having a healthy and secure relationship. There are also a lot of terms that are bundled up and thrown around with this term toxic: codependency, enmeshment, love addiction. And I want to pull apart the underlying cycle and really look at those dynamics through the lens of inquiry with understanding and compassion. Because being stuck with feeling we're broken, toxic, or problematic is really counterintuitive to healing. And you're most likely already on the way to healing, but you might not realize it yet if you're prone to being hard on yourself. So we're going to look at the origin of toxic patterns and our responsibility in this piece, and answer the question, is there really blame to be placed here? Can we really place blame on ourselves or be a victim and blame our partners? As an aside for today, if you're a survivor of physical or emotional abuse, yes, you are a victim to abuse and you need to seek therapy for that. And if you're ready to look at the reasons why you weren't able to leave your abuser, you'll find some value in today's lesson. But it comes with a warning. Having been a victim to emotional abuse myself, I know that in abusive relationships, we feel like we don't have a choice to leave. We can't leave because it doesn't feel safe to do so. And I'll be unpacking the choice that we actually do have here. So please stay within your window of tolerance. And if you find yourself in a shame spiral, it might not be the right time to look at your own part and take responsibility yet, which is completely normal because healing happens in stages that feel safe in the body and it takes time. So if you've been in a toxic relationship and experienced trauma, chances are you've been involved in a cycle of unhealthy relating and communicating. Now, I'm really not a fan of the term toxic, so I'm going to be using the term unhealthy, which describes a whole host of common behaviors that become really toxic or unhealthy when they become extreme. I don't have time to go through all of them, so here is a quick screenshot for you. Like I said, a lot of these behaviors are super common, and the tipping point at which they're unhealthy is how extreme or frequent they are. And some of those behaviors are actually so common in our society that you'll see them played out in films and TV shows as if that behavior is okay. So is it okay? And at what point is it not? Where is that tipping point that it's unhealthy and toxic? Before I answer that question, let's look at where they come from. We've learnt a lot of these behaviors from our family when we were growing up. In school, our teachers and school friends might have lashed out where they were under stress. And as adults in the workplace, we might have a boss or a colleague that's overly controlling or opinionated. And so then in relationships, it gets worse. We will often be the worst version of ourselves and take those behaviors to the extreme and see our partner also do the same. This is where the cycle dynamic comes in to help us look at where the responsibility and potential blame lies. Unhealthy behavior has a symbiotic nature. If one person starts behaving badly, it really provokes us to match that behavior and energy in order to communicate and get our point across. If one person stops that behavior by setting a boundary, the other person might continue for a while, but at some point the behavior can't keep going because that person isn't receiving the stimulus to react to. This is why it's a great strategy if you struggle with controlling your emotions or channeling your energy, which I talk on in this video here, to take some time out for your system to rest. Just call a time out for 20 minutes. So say, for example, you're in conversation with someone who's raising their voice or yelling at you. Our automatic tendency is to raise our voice in return, unless we're self-aware. We're really well practiced at yelling back since we were yelled at as kids, right? It's our natural instinct to defend and fight for our sense of justice. And likewise, if you meet someone who's quietly spoken and thoughtful and calm-natured, you will soon slow down yourself, speak more quietly and more thoughtfully. Okay, we've got mirror neurons in our brain that help us to mirror behavior from the people we interact with, because connection is a primal survival need. So unhealthy behavior gets passed around pretty quickly, like the common cold. So who's actually at fault? At what point is it unhealthy or toxic? Is the instigator the person who loses their nana all the time? Or are you toxic and unhealthy in the way that you engage and fight back? I believe the answer is you are unhealthy at the point you don't take responsibility for your behavior. If you or someone you know engages in any behavior on this list in an extreme or frequent way and doesn't take responsibility for themselves, and they tend to blame outwardly or put themselves in victim mindset, i.e. you made me do this, and again, this doesn't count for survivors of abuse, then that person is engaging in an unhealthy or toxic behavior or way because you're not taking personal responsibility for how you're conducting yourself. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's a pretty strict framework to operate from, right? We're not perfect and we can't be conscious of ourselves all the time. And I totally agree with you. We aren't always going to be able to manage ourselves gracefully and with understanding of our wounds. But what I'm showing you today is a framework that you can strive towards to know for sure that you're doing your due diligence in learning from your past mistakes and making every effort to not be unhealthy or toxic in any way. Because the bottom line is we all have a choice in how we choose to react. A lot of people will argue with this point and say, of course I'm angry. That person broke my heart or cheated on me. And let's be clear, yes, you be angry if that happens. Feel the feelings of hurt and anger, but you do not need to lash out and create chaos because of that. You have a choice in how you handle the anger and hurt that you're feeling. And the healthy choice is to feel that emotion within you, hold a safe container in your body to process it by feeling it, and to not repress it and let it come out instead, because it's always going to come out towards the person or people that hurt you. That's only going to make you feel worse about yourself, create deeper shame inside you. Now, let me know in the comments below what you think. If you've ever struggled with this process of taking personal responsibility for your feelings and emotions and taking the high road in conducting yourself with poise and grace rather than simply lashing out. It's not easy to do, and I'd love to hear from you and your experience. So, personal choice. I'm going to unpack the internal cycle that leads us to thinking we don't have a choice when we react, like we're out of control or a wounded animal. And then I'm going to show you how to take personal responsibility when you're triggered and show you some self-healing practices that will help you make better choices the next time you feel that urge to lash out. So this is the cycle of reactivity, and you'll see this working big time with people that are super reactive in day-to-day life. But in the context of relationships where we tend to get triggered more deeply, it's really useful to reflect on your own cycle of reactivity and what thoughts and beliefs that are getting you stuck in that cycle. So we have a trigger. Someone says something or does something in a certain way, or they don't say or do something, and we overreact. There's this tug at a deeper wound within us. This is a trigger for us that's coming from our past. It's only got 10% to do with our present reality, 90% to do with our past and subconscious. So then that defense mechanism comes up. We project onto that person or situation an expectation of what they should do or not do. Like, you should have said this, or how can you say that to me? And this projection takes us straight into blame or victim mindset. And depending on what type of behavior you're used to engaging in as a response to the trigger, which often comes from our childhood when we watched our caregivers do the same thing, we'll go ahead and get mad, we'll get sad, or we'll shut down and stonewall. The problem in relationships is that because we've been hurt before and we've probably been in extremely reactive situations and we have an oversensitivity to certain things, right? So because we've been hurt or trust has been broken in the past in certain ways, we've been lied to or cheated on, and at the slightest sense that something now might be happening like that, our senses go into overdrive and we can become way more reactive than the situation actually calls for. When this happens, it's an old triggered memory that's coming up in your body that doesn't have words. It's an old feeling memory. Now again, as an aside, just to protect some of you that are watching this, there is sometimes a real threat in front of us and we need to reach out to friends or talk something out in therapy if we're not actually sure. Because sometimes that 90% that's triggered in our body becomes so real, we can't see the truth that's in front of us. So let's take a really common trigger for women, which is control. We're oversensitive to being controlled by the masculine or men. If we've actually been controlled or abused, this is a big wound for us. But let's take a situation where it's not actually control, it's assertion, which is a natural, healthy part of masculine energy. Let's say you're dating someone new or you've started a new relationship and your masculine person or man really asserts himself and takes control of deciding what you're going to do on your date that evening. From this wound, we are trying to assert ourselves as women because we don't want to be seen as a pushover or a doormat, because we've been oversensitized to this. And the reality is, it's such a wonderful thing to have a guy organize a date for us. It can make us feel really special and cared about if we let it. But if that trigger arises and we make the choice to dip into the victim mindset and believe they're actually being controlling, our cycle of reactivity is going to project onto them that he's controlling. And the irony is that when we do that, we are the ones that are being controlling in that moment. This is the incredible irony of insecurities. Our wounded parts that cause our extreme sensitivity, when we act and project from our wounds, we become the very thing we're projecting onto them. So if you're projecting onto them that they're abandoning you or rejecting you in some way, you will abandon or reject them in that same way on some level when you project onto them when you're being reactive. If you're projecting onto them that they're being selfish in some way, you will actually be selfish in the way you react. Our wounded responses when we feel out of control can turn us into the very thing we hate and fear most. And then what happens? We feel deep shame around it. And depending on how extreme it is, we can really push people away, particularly if they're healthy and secure and they didn't actually commit any crime. This is the point that we start to question whether we're toxic or not, right? This is the time to look at our own wounds that are being triggered and start taking personal responsibility for how we react from our past and create chaos in our present. It might feel real in our bodies because we are having a real trauma response, but it's not the truth in front of us. It's not a reasonable response to the present. It's your past. And you know that when the input or the deed done is not equal to the charge it brings up with you, it's your past. So what do we do with this? Where do we go from this point of awareness at how we can be out of control, reactive, and unhealthy in our behaviors? The answer is to take personal responsibility for our past and start learning the discipline of energy management. Now, I go into more depth around cultivating our inner masculine in the form of boundaries in this video above my head. And I'm going to now show you how to cultivate the discipline of choice and internal integrity when we're triggered in these deep ways. Now, the first and most important part of personal responsibility is self-compassion. I can't stress compassion enough because shame, its opposite, has such a charge to it that if you go into shame, you will almost always drop the ball and react. We all carry a deep amount of shame. I call it my shame baby. And cultivating self-compassion is the opposite and more powerful energy to help us step out of shame quickly. So when you notice you're about to react and you feel a strong emotion come up, name that emotion out loud if you can. I'm feeling angry. Notice how it manifests in your body, where it's tight or tense, and then just allow yourself to investigate it for a minute. And then, as if you were calming an angry child, Soothe yourself. It might be in the form of just holding your hand or giving yourself a body hug, or you might visualize a grandparent or someone who really cares about you just kissing you on the forehead and soothing you and saying it's okay. Now, if you have a strong spiritual connection with yourself, that energy might be from the universe or God, and that universal compassion that everyone experiences these emotions and triggers. It's completely normal and there is nothing wrong with you. Secondly, you need to remind your body that it's safe in the moment, because a trigger takes us back to a time when we weren't safe. Our body will want to respond with fight, flight, or freeze to the old memory, even though it's safe right now. So you can use this mantra in the moment out loud or in your head and say to yourself, I am safe, I am loved, I belong. You're saying that to this inner part of yourself that's having this living nightmare. This is also a great time to ground your body and use your sensations to bring your body back into the present. So feel your feet on the ground. Name a few colors you can see around you, things that you can hear or smell. And lastly, you want to cultivate a discipline for yourself that you hold yourself to. Now, if you're used to going with the waves of emotion all the time, this is going to be new for you, which is great. It's a skill that you can learn with discipline. So get clear on what you really value in communication and relationships, what you hold people around yourselves to, and turn this into values you hold yourself to. So respect, talking with a calm tone, patience, listening and compassion, and clear, articulate language. Holding yourself in this kind of integrity operates as a kind of anchor for you to the seabed amongst these waves of emotions and triggers that can knock us around. Internal discipline takes on a kind of a tough love voice inside us, saying to ourselves, I will not tolerate this from myself anymore. I am worthy of behaving better. I will only speak to myself with kindness and compassion and patience. I'll attend to my emotions in an appropriate way. When you get clear on who you are and what you stand for, you can better manage internally the tendencies and triggers that would pull you outside of the window of what you're worthy of being. Because when we react and act from our wounds, we're self-abandoning. We're not being our best selves. And we're worthy of cultivating this higher value self so that we can have a relationship and life in general that is of higher value. So I'm hoping by now you realize that there is no blame to be placed here when people act from their wounds. It's when people react without integrity or conscious awareness of themselves that behavior can be toxic or unhealthy. And this includes people who engage in physical and emotional abuse. They need to be held accountable at a clinical level. And not everyone is interested in taking on personal responsibility for themselves. And to be honest, that's their loss, because they will literally live their lives in an uncontrollable way and go through their life being at the whim of their wounds. And I've gone through the cycle of reactivity and the 3 steps to stop the cycle: compassion, safety, and discipline. And I want to point out one more thing before we finish, which is really your next step if you followed along this far, and that is looking at your boundaries. Because one emotion that drives our reactivity is an emotion that needs to be listened to and respected, and that emotion is anger. Anger is a very intelligent and precious emotion we have because it gives us the most direct link to what our values are. Because when anger comes up in us, it's because that value has been walked on or broken in some way by someone around us. Think of anger as a superhighway to our subconscious. So obviously that's an entirely new video that I'm working on, but know that in jumping out of the cycle of reactivity, I am in no way encouraging you to suppress or repress emotions. And I want you to check out this video on how to create boundaries around your emotions so that you can process them more healthily. And the beliefs and behaviors that drive your cycle of reactivity form the healing work in the first phase of my group program, Love by Design. And if you want to know more about how to heal your triggers that come up so that you can better act from a place of integrity and conscious behavior, I want you to join me in my free training to learn the 3 steps on how to go from anxious and insecure to secure in relationships. And you can sign up for that in the webinar in the description below. You can also interact with me on a more personal level in my free Facebook group, Love by Design. The link is for that below as well. And if you want to sign up for the free one-to-one consult, you'll find a link for that there. And please, if you have any questions or any comments about the video today, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I will be down there interacting with you and helping you along with your journey. And if you found the video helpful and valuable, please click the thumbs up button. You will really help me out and this channel out. And if you want more content, please subscribe because I post new lessons twice a week. And in the meantime, here are some great next step videos for you to watch so that you can move one step closer to an incredible relationship with yourself and the partner you desire. And for now, I'll see you in the next video.